Philadelphia is steep in broadcast history. From the early pioneering days of broadcasting in the 1920s to today, Philadelphia has always been at the forefront. The Delaware Valley has been home to some of the best local programming in the country, starting with the early soap operas and children's shows to pioneering the best news formats in the country. Much of it all began right here. From radio announcers to television personalities, cameramen to directors, these were the broadcasters that burned out the airwaves. These were the pioneers of Philadelphia broadcasting.
Welcome to another edition of Pioneers of Philadelphia Broadcasting. I'm here today with radio broadcast legend Bill Wright Sr. You know Bill Wright from WIBG and WPEN. Bill, you grew up in Birmingham, Alabama.
Right.
During the Depression in the 1930s. What was it like growing up there?
Well, it wasn't bad for the Wright children. My father ran a bakery that he had inherited from his father, so we always had bread to eat and plenty of other good stuff. But it was quite a scene in my household of 4 boys and 2 girls, all born within a 6-year period of time. And my mother got a lot of credit with having those children. I think that there's a shot of the 4 boys with Mom. I say 4 boys because the one with curls is me. My mother wanted a girl so bad that she let my hair grow. So that was the early part of our time in Birmingham, up until when I was 10 years of age. And at that time, I was stricken with a bone disease called osteomyelitis, which is a staphylococcus infection of the bone marrow. And it played havoc with my life for roughly the next 5 years, one operation after another, because there was no medical help that other than going in and scraping the bone. So I put up with that for like 5 years, and it was kind of a torturous period of time. But one wonderful thing that happened in my household was a song fest on Saturday night. My mother played piano. They were choir singers, by the way, my parents. And mother played piano, and we'd do all the old familiar songs, and enjoyed that very, very much. When I was about 15 and still walking on crutches, my mother said, "Come on, we're going into the city." And I said, "Where are we going, Mom?" She said, "I'll tell you when we get there," keeping it a secret. So we go in to the Protective Life building. Upstairs, the elevator opens, and it said WAPI, the Voice of Alabama, a radio station. Anyway, I hasten to point out that my mother had given me an Arvin bedside radio back in the early days of my disease, and I listened to that radio constantly. I had pictures of soap opera people and Santos Ortega and Alice Frost and so many. So anyway, here we were standing in the lobby of this radio station. My mother said, "I'm Margaret Wright, and this is my son, Billy. We're here to see Reuben Martinson." And Reuben Martinson came out, a good-looking man with long hair, artistic. And he said, "Mrs. Wright, nice to meet you. You're Billy?" I said, "Yes." He said, "You're here to audition for the Youth and Melody Chorus." I said, "I am?" Anyway, we go into the studio. My mother sits down at the piano, whips off an Irish tune that we knew very well. I sang that, and then Peggy O'Neill, and Reuben Martinson said, "That's swell, Bill. Would you like to join the Youth and Melody Chorus?" I said, "I guess so." Anyway, I became the Irish troubadour on the radio. But the first words that I ever spoke in 1943 were the following: I dedicated an Irish song to my grandmother, Mamie Carney, out in Inglenook. And those were the first words. I'd like to dedicate this song to my grandma, Mamie Carney.
Now, you had a wonderful singing voice, and you knew that early. Did you know you had a voice for radio or stage or anything like that?
Well, I guess in a way I had a prayer in the back of my mind that I might be able to speak, because I had spoken with those introductions to the songs and singing, but I had no idea in the world that I could ever be on the radio as a radio announcer. Well, the Lord stepped in, because my mother, we were very religious people, and there was a mission at my church, and my mother said to me, "Bill, you going to the mission?" I said, "No, Mother, I'm busy tonight." She said, the last night of the mission, she said, "Bill, I'm not asking you, I'm telling you, you're going to the mission." "Yes, Mama." So I go to the mission with my parents. After the services were over, I meet the choir director of St. Paul's Cathedral. As I mentioned earlier, my parents sang in that choir, and he introduced me to a lady whose name was Evelyn Walker. I knew the name immediately. "You are Evelyn Walker of Miss Ann and the Comics." The lady was a school teacher and came in every night and read the funny papers, a la Fiorello LaGuardia in New York, every night on the air on WSGN. And I just plagued her with, I'm 3 years in the University of Alabama School of Broadcasting, and I love it, and I hope to be on the radio someday. Anyway, we took our leave. We get home, and about 30 minutes after we arrived back home, the phone rang, and it was Evelyn Walker. And she said, "Bill, pardon the hour, but I think you might be interested in knowing that the station I work for, WSGN, fired an announcer this afternoon for something that he said on the air. I mean, used the F word or something and thought the mic was off." So anyway, she said, "Gene Plumstead, the program director, is here." And I told him a little bit about our conversation, and he wants to speak to you. So I put on my big announcer voice and, "Hello." He said, "Bill, Miss Walker tells me that you're interested in broadcasting." I said, "Am I? Boy, oh boy." And I plagued him with the 3 years in broadcast pioneers, broadcast pioneers, that slipped out, broadcast school at the University of Alabama. And he said, "Well, you sound pretty good on the phone, Bill. How about coming down and auditioning tomorrow afternoon?" I said, "Yes, sir, I'll be there." Do you think I slept a wink that night? Anyway, I go down, 2 o'clock, they've ready for me. Plumstead, I meet him, and he hands me a commercial for Burger Beer. I could do that. Burger Beer, invigorating and all this and that and the other. So he said, "Go in the studio, read the commercial over a couple of times, and when the red light comes on, why, you start reading." So I go in, I rehearsed a couple of times, and the red light came on. Burger Beer, invigorating, scintillating, blah, 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 blah. The red light went off. I thought, "Oh, Billy, you've blown it. What'd you do? What didn't you do?" He comes in and says, "Bill, can you start tomorrow afternoon on WSGN, one of my town's 3 top radio stations?" That was the beginning of my professional broadcast career.
You have a wonderful story about a professor of yours at Alabama who taught you how to lose your Southern accent.
Exactly. His name was Jim Duncan. He was from Davenport, Iowa, and he took a shine to me. And I failed to mention that my first report at Alabama in pre-med had 3 D's and an F, and if I'd flunked out for that semester, but they let me back in, and I saw that the School of Radio Arts had opened up in Alabama, and I got involved with that. And my first report card after that was 2 A's and a B, and my mother just couldn't believe it. Anyway, I had found my way into broadcasting at the University of Alabama. And then with the comment that I made about Evelyn Walker and our friendship, I got that job at WSGN, my first professional job. I went from there to Florida, eloped with my first beautiful wife, who died, by the way, at age 34, the mother of 3 children, Catherine, and worked my way back to Birmingham with the help of a man named Lionel Baxter, who became my mentor. And Lionel hired me at Channel 13, and I became Uncle Bill and Uncle Bill's Fun Shop, and I did a children's program for 4 years, very successful. I drove an old T-model Ford around that some kid had named Bounce-A-Lot. There was a little song that I wrote, Bounce-A-Lot, Bounce-A-Lot is such a funny car. I took a fat man for a ride, and he must have lost 100 pounds. Anyway, that was my singing efforts, and I wrote a few other songs like Captain Blinky of the Elves Brigade and some others. So anyway, Lionel Baxter called me, and he said, Bill, want to go to Philadelphia? I said, is the Pope Catholic? Anyway, he said, well, we bought, this is Storer Broadcasting, we've bought Channel 12 in Philadelphia, and they want to throw in a little radio station called WIBG, and I have sent for a tape of the station. They only want $250,000 for it. So we listened to the tape, and it was Joe Niagara, who had an 8 rating on a nothing radio station. And he said, Joe was playing Frank Sinatra, Rosie Clooney, Fats Domino, Ruth Brown. You know, he was intermixing rock and roll with the standards.
You were at WIBG riding high for 10 years, from 1958 through 1968. Then things started to turn around. What happened?
Well, WFIL, which was owned by Annenberg, decided that they could play the same music that we played, but with no commercials. And bless Pat, they did. And our ratings went down, theirs went up, ours went down, theirs went up. And we were called into the office one day and said, fellas, we're changing our program thinking, and you're all fired. 7 of us were thrown out on the street after, and this was after almost 11 years with Storer. So anyway, after pouting, I moped around, and then I started freelancing, and I produced several major programs, like The Road to Victory after the war ended and all. And the phone rang one day about 1990, and Dean Tyler was on the line, and he said, Bill, I run WPEN's programming, and I'd like for you to come down and substitute for Joe Niagara and Ken Garland. And I said, I'd love to. So I did, and that started a 4-year brilliance on the air at WPEN, and I really enjoyed that so much with nostalgia and big bands. But Jeff, I'll tell you, broadcasting has been my life for over 70 years, and I give credit to Lionel Baxter, I give credit to Evelyn Walker, but I give credit to my Lord for giving me the avenues that I've had to become a part of a great, fabulous industry, broadcast pioneers, and I thank you so much for talking with me.
Bill, the radio business has changed so much since the days of Wibbage. How has it changed in your respect? What's different now? Or what were you able to do back in the 50s and 60s that you can't do now?
Broadcasting has changed so much. I mean, this rap business, I won't even get into it because it's a desperate attempt at greed and money. and just give me the old melodic sounds of Sinatra and Clooney, and and I'm perfectly happy. And even the Diamonds and the other rock stars that we had, and Elvis. I just that's where I'd like to be.
How about you personally as a radio host? What could you do back in the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s that a radio host can't do now?
Talk about yourself, your family, your experiences. You didn't warm up to the audience because they didn't have time. You thought.
Not so much of personality anymore.
Yep. A lot less personality.
Bill, Catherine, your first wife, died of cancer, as you said, at the age of 34, left you 3 wonderful children. You married again later.
I did marry.
To a woman named Kathy, by the way.
Yeah, right.
Another very attractive blonde woman.
Lovely.
But she gave you three more wonderful children.
3 marvelous children, Paul, Peter, and Catherine. And my children and grandchildren, I have to talk about them for a second. I have 10 grandchildren and 4 great-grands. And believe me, on Thanksgiving Friday, they get together in this very room here at Trinity House, and we have a marvelous party. So again, I'm so blessed in my life with the graces that the Lord has sent me.
And your granddaughter just got engaged, I hear?
Yes, my daughter.
Your daughter, excuse me.
My daughter Kelly, Katie. I get them confused with the K's. Katie got engaged down in Baltimore with a wonderful fella.
That's wonderful. Bill, you've had many triumphs and challenges in your life, but you're a man of faith. What keeps you going? What keeps you...
Well, I have a favorite prayer and a favorite saint that I pray to, and that is Padre Pio, who is now a saint. And his favorite prayer was, "Sacred Heart of Jesus, I place all my trust in you."
Well, Uncle Bill, and I call you Uncle Bill out of respect. I know that it's not your favorite title but a lot of us in Broadcast Pioneers do call you that because of who you are. You are an honored and treasured member of Broadcast Pioneers of Philadelphia, most highly respected. And it was just wonderful to have a few minutes to talk with you here today.
Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you, Bill.